March 8, 1983, Evil Empire. President Ronald Reagan delivered a speech to the National Association of Evangelicals at the Sheraton Twin Towers Hotel in Orlando, Florida. In this address, he referred to the Soviet Union as an evil empire, a phrase that would come to define his presidency and shape the course of the Cold War. This speech reflected Reagan's strong anti-communist views and marked a shift from the policy of détente, which had characterized U.S.-Soviet relations in the 1970s, to a more confrontational approach. Reagan's speech framed the Cold War as a moral struggle between freedom and oppression. He characterized the Soviet Union as a totalitarian regime that suppressed individual liberties, denied basic human rights, and sought global domination. He urged Americans to recognize the threat posed by communism, encouraging a firm stand against the ideology that governed the USSR. The Evil Empire speech was not only a political statement but also a moral declaration, reinforcing the idea that the United States had a responsibility to oppose tyranny. The context of this speech was significant. At the time, there was growing support for the nuclear freeze movement in the United States, aimed at halting the arms race between the superpowers. Reagan strongly opposed this movement, believing that a strong military stance was essential to counter Soviet aggression. His speech served to justify increased U.S. defense spending and the development of the Strategic Defense Initiative, commonly known as Star Wars, which aimed to create a missile defense system to protect against nuclear attacks. Internationally, Reagan's speech had far-reaching consequences. It deepened the divide between the United States and the Soviet Union, escalating tensions between the two superpowers. Soviet leaders, including General Secretary Yuri Andropov, denounced Reagan's remarks, accusing him of escalating hostilities and promoting an ideological crusade against communism. The speech was viewed in Moscow as a clear signal that the United States was abandoning any hopes of peaceful coexistence and instead preparing for a heightened Cold War confrontation. Despite the criticism, Reagan's approach ultimately contributed to the fall of the Soviet Union. His policies put economic and military pressure on the USSR, which was already struggling with internal weaknesses. By the late 1980s, Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev introduced reforms such as glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring, in an attempt to revitalize the Soviet system. Reagan's rhetoric, combined with his military strategy, played a role in forcing the Soviet Union to the negotiating table, leading to arms reduction agreements and eventually the dissolution of the USSR in 1991. Reagan's Evil Empire speech remains one of the most memorable moments of his presidency. It embodied his commitment to fighting communism and defending democratic values. By framing the Cold War in moral terms, he reinforced the belief that the United States had a unique role in promoting freedom worldwide. Though controversial at the time, his words reflected a broader strategy that helped shape the outcome of the Cold War, cementing his legacy as a leader who stood firm against the Soviet threat. For enthusiasts of historical ephemera, visit history-collectors.com to find collectibles that might complement your collection. You can own a piece of history,